Yeah. So the Quran is to serve as a clarification for all things. The word tibyana comes from the word bayan, right? Bayan, which is to clarify, to elucidate, to declare something, to make something clear. So the book is a clarification for all things, not for everybody, for Muslims, right? So if you are a Muslim, you are part of the religion called Al-Islam, chapter 3, verse 19. Inna dina inda Allahi al-Islam, right? So Al-Islam, it is the submission. That is the religion with God. So if you're part of that religion, you the passenger, we call it a Muslim because you submit to God. Do you see the point? So now you the one submitting to God. God has given you, since the religion is a complete religion, chapter 5 verse 3, Al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum wa atmamtu alaykum ni'mati wa raditu lakum islam dina. He has completed the religion as Islam. You the passenger inside, you are called a Muslim. So you the Muslim, God has given you a book, which is a complete book, chapter 6 verse 115, وَتَمَّتِ كَلِمَةُ رَبِّكَ صِدْقًا وَعَدْلًا لَا مُبَدِّلَ لِكَلِمَاتِهِ. Right? The word of your Lord is complete in truth and justice. So since he has given you a book which is complete in truth and justice, he has given you that book which is a clarification for all things as for you the Muslim. Right? So somebody who is a mushrik or somebody who follows Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, the Quran is never complete for him. He would rather want to find explanations from other sources. Do you see my point? So the Quran is what we are going to delve into to get all our evidences. Yeah, salam, brother Jamal Muhammad Ali. Long time. Mitakulu. Now, so we start the topic for today. Then, when we say sujood, it's a noun, right? Sujood is a noun. But when we say sujood, it is derived from a word, right? It is derived from a word form, that is a verb, before it becomes sujood. So what is the verb? The verb is sajada. Sajada. The sin and jim and then dal. So sajada, right? So the word sujood is created from the word sajada. So now when we say sajada, you can find sajada in chapter 15 verse 30. Sajada al-malaikatu. Sajada al-malaikatu. Chapter 15 verse 30. Similarly, chapter 38 of the Quran verse 73. Sajada is used in a verb form. It's a verb. Verb. Sajada. Right? Now, what is the meaning of sajada? Now, generalized meaning is to make obeisance, to show submission, to prostrate or bow down. That is the meaning of sajada. So somebody might say, how did you know the meaning? Or did you have to check dictionaries? Or do you have to go by what the Arabians of today, the modern day standard, the modern standard Arabic, or is it by the Fusha, or is it by the classic Arabic of the Quran? How did you get to know that? We are going to find out today, right? So now, like I said, the sajada is to make obeisance, is to show submission, is different from to submit. That is aslim, or we say taslim. To submit is different. Taslim, aslim is different from this sajada. But I'm going to show you how is it different, in which concept, right? To show submission, to prostrate or bow down. That is sajada as a verb, right? Now, when we bring the meaning into a noun, that is to make obeisance, that is basically obeisance. So obeisance, what is the meaning of obeisance? The general meaning of obeisance. Obeisance obeisance is the bending the head or body or knee as a sign of reverence, that is respect, or submission, or shame, or greeting. Salam, Brother Kelly Adams. That is obeisance. Then the second meaning of obeisance is the act of obeying. That is why we have the word obey, obeisance. It is the act of obeying, dutiful or submissive behavior with respect to another person. That is obeisance. So I can be making obeisance to my father. I can be making obeisance to my boss. You understand? So it depends on the context. Then again, we have to show submission. To show submission. So showing submission. What is the meaning of showing submission? The condition of having submitted to control by hey, Wanini. Ragas, please check them, please. Salim. To showing submission, the condition of having submitted to control by someone or something else. That is, condition of having submitted to control, which means somebody else is controlling you. So you allow it, which is another form of showing submission to that person or thing, right? Then we have the prostration. Prostration, which all comes under sujood, right? What is the meaning of prostration? The emotional equivalent of throwing your body to the ground in submission. The emotional equivalent of throwing your body to the ground in submission. Right? You're showing the submission, but by showing it, you need to throw your body down to show the submission. That is also sujood. The second meaning of prostration, the act of assuming a prostrate prostrate position. To assume a prostrate position. That is also what? Prostration. Now, so we've seen the three meanings of the word sujood or sajada as a verb. Sajada. Right? To make obeisance, to show submission, to prostrate or bow down. In the same context of sujood. Now, when we come to understanding a word in a language, to understand a concept of a word in a language, we need something we call context. In English, we say context. Context. Now, when we are dealing with context, what is the meaning of context? Context is a discourse that surrounds a language unit, and helps to determine its interpretation. That is context, right? Yeah, that is context. The second meaning, the set of facts or circumstances that surround a situation or event. So based on the circumstance, you can try to understand the situation or event. Or the first meaning, a discourse that surrounds a language unit and helps to determine its interpretation. So I'll break this down to you so that you understand what is meant by context in English. Now, for instance, before I go to the Quran, in every language, there is something we call literal and non-literal. When you are dealing with a language unit. So this is why context plays a major role. So you need to understand what we call literal language, literal speech, and then non-literal speech, which is figment of speech, right? So to give you an example, for instance, if you go to the English language, sometimes people will use words like, for instance, somebody will say, below the belt. Below the belt. Let's say I tell my daughter that, hey, when you are wearing your shoes, don't come inside the house. Take your shoes off from the house before you come inside, right? So as soon as I set forth that rule, then in front of my daughter, she will see me wearing my shoes and coming inside the house, right? So then in English, my daughter can use a word that by telling me, oh, Baba, this is below the belt. She will just say, this is below the belt. Now, this is a figment of speech. Below the belt is not a literal sense of speech. It is non-literal, right? And this is a term she used. So I, not understanding the figment of speech, the context of English language, I might not know what she's talking about, because I just set forth a rule. I said, don't bring your shoe inside the house. Then all of a sudden, she is telling me this is below the belt. We are not talking about a belt. So how come she's saying below the belt? No. Non-literally, she meant this is unfair. This is not a rule, an unfair rule. This is not a rule she has to abide by, because me setting forth the rules, I'm going against the rules. So that is below the belt. That becomes unfair. But the choice of words, she would rather use the word below the belt. It's a figment of speech. So if I have to take the word literally, I will be in limbo. I'll be confused. I'll be telling her, my daughter, what do you mean by below the belt? What is that? Do you get it? So assuming you are not an Englishman and you just step in English country, and then somebody just used the word below the belt. Now you'll be looking around your waist and thinking, oh, there's something moving around below my belt. No. So that is not the point. You get the point. Then again, in English, you use the word like beat around the bush. Beat around the bush. Now, without understanding a language unit, the discourse that surrounds a language unit, that and which will help you to determine its interpretation. The moment in the speech, let's say you are talking about, you ask somebody, hey, how is your wife doing? Then all of a sudden the person starts talking about football. He hasn't answered your question, right? Then he starts talking about football. Now, in English, there's a word you can use to him and say, hey, man, why are you beating around the bush? Right? It is a figment of speech. Why are you beating around the bush? But when we take the words literally, it means beat around the bush. We all know bush, the forest. Beating around. But that is not a literal sense of speech. The person is using a non-literal form of speech. So me not understanding English, the moment he says, man, why are you beating around the bush? I will be looking around to see if there's a bush around. I'm like, I wasn't beating around the bush. Like, to me not understanding English, I'll be thinking it's about beating. Like somebody's being beaten around the bush, like fighting, to beat somebody around the forest. Do you see my point? So here then we deal with context. The context is we were talking about your wife. I ask you, how is your wife doing? You should have asked me, you should have just answered and said, oh, she's fine, or she's not well. Then we move on to talk about football. But how is your wife doing? Then all of a sudden you start talking about football. You haven't answered me. So I can say, hey, why are you beating around the bush? Which means you have to, why are you avoiding the issue at hand? The point we are talking about, why are you avoiding that? You understand? So that is beating around the bush. And that is non-literal in English language. It is not a literal figment of speech. Because if we have to deal with it literally, then we are in limbo again. The third example. Let's say you did something, but you are justified. The thing you did wasn't wrong. Then somebody has to criticize you by talking about you. Like some of the quranalone followers, they do against me. They criticize me, they judge me harshly, wrongly, and whatever have you. Then to come and justify myself, I can just say, cut me some slack, or cut me a slack. It's a figment of speech. Me saying, cut me some slack, I'm not talking about food, right? I'm not saying, give me a piece of cake. But it's a figment of speech, and it's non-literal. Which means I'm trying to say, do not judge me harshly or severely. Don't judge me roughly. You need to be just when you're judging me. Do you get the point? But in English, I'll just say, cut me some slack. Do you see the point? So by me not understanding a language unit and knowing the context of it, I will always misunderstand certain things around the language. So I need to understand what a language is consist of, that is the language unit, then I can understand the context is being used to determine the meaning or interpretation of the subject being discussed. So this is just to clarify, to clear the point, the door step, so that we move on to the topic itself. Now, when we go to Quran chapter 3, verse 7, let's see what God says in Quran chapter 3, verse 7. Now, this chapter and verse is going to help us understand how people are having misconceptions concerning understanding words in the Quran. Right? Like I said, going to study Arabic, going to madrasa to learn Arabic is a plus. Right? Before you approach the Quran, try to have a background in Arabic, at least study Arabic, right? Then you can have, the the clarity on coming around, words in the Quran. Now, chapter 3, verse 7, God says, هو الذي أنزل عليك الكتاب منه آيات محكمات. Then he says, هن الكتاب وأخر متشابهة. Then he says, فَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ زَيْغٌ فَيَتَّبِعُونَ مَا تَشَابَهَ مِنْهُ. Then he says, ابتغاء فتنة وابتغاء تاويل. Then he says, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَاويلَهُ. It doesn't stop there. It says, إِلَّا اللَّهِ. It doesn't stop there. In some of the Qurans, you will see they put waqaf there. That waqaf they put is the qaf. You see the qaf, like, it doesn't mean stop. It means relax, but not stop. Whenever you see them put mim, that means stop. So there is a difference. So God says, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهُ. Then he says, وَالرَّاسِخُونَ فِي الْعِلْمِ. So it's not only stopping at the name of God, no. إِلَّا اللَّهُ, then it continues, وَالرَّاسِخُونَ فِي الْعِلْمِ. Now this رَاسِخُونَ فِي الْعِلْمِ, يَقُولُونَ آمَنَّا بِهِ. They believe in it. كُلٌّ مِّنْ إِنْدِ رَبِّنَا وَمَا يَذَّكَّرُ إِلَّا أُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. Now let's see the meaning of the verse I just read. It says, He, God, is the one who has revealed the book to you, Muhammad alayhi salam, of which are muhkamat, precise signs, the signs of the Quran, the symbols you see, they are precise. Most of the signs, verses are precise, right? Which is literal. When something is precise, it's literal. You don't have to take it non-literally when it's literal, right? Then it says, they are the source of the book. Kitab. They are the main source of the book. Yeah, salam, Brother Muhyiddin Balash. So they are the main source of the book, the main part of the book. Then it says, while others are mutashabiha, while others are similar, not the same, they are similar. If something is similar, doesn't mean it's the same. This phone I'm using is not the same as the phone I'm using for this video, right? But let's say this is iPhone 7 and this is also iPhone 7. Then it's the same phone. They are the same. But if this is iPhone 6 and this is iPhone 7, they might be similar, but they are not the same. Do you see? Because iPhone 7 is the advanced version of iPhone 6. So they might be similar, but they are not the same. Even though iPhone 6 and iPhone 7, but not the same. So there's a difference here God is telling us. Some of the verses are precise. They are literal, right? You don't need any secondary thought or any deep thinking to know that meaning, right? For instance, if I say, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, praise be to the Lord of the worlds or the Lord of the universe. It's just precise. We don't need any metaphorical, any nonsensical grammar or no. You don't need that. You see. But when God says وَأُخَرُ مُتَشَابِهَا, while others are similar, they are similar, which means there is a great deal of work to be done in order to differentiate, to see why are they similar, but why is it not the same. You understand? It needs deep thinking, reflection to contemplate the Quran. So chapter 38 verse 29 says, Kitabun anzalnahu ilayka mubarakun liyadabbaru ayatihi waliyatazakkaru ulil albab. It is a blessed book which we have revealed to you, so that they, the people, may contemplate its verses. Salim! Contemplate its verses, and that those of intelligence will take it. Kubarkuwa, kajai, barkuwa. Ragas. Nadira. Yes, a minute. Give me the ginger card. What? Salim. Kubali nena ya bukunje. Now, sorry for the pausing. So then God says, as for those in whose hearts is deviation, Salam, brother Muhammad Junaid, in whose hearts is deviation, فَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ زَيْغٌ, they will then follow what is similar. What is similar, that is what they will follow. It is similar to that. They will follow that. Then God says, seeking discord, they seek fitna, to bring discord, disturbance, like chaos, and seeking its interpretation, right? Trying to seek its interpretation because they have deviance in their hearts, so they want to cause problem now. But they do not know its interpretation except Allah, that is God. It doesn't stop there. And those deeply rooted in knowledge. Now, those deeply rooted in knowledge, they say, not God, those deeply rooted in knowledge, they say, we believe in it. All is from our Lord. All the verses in the Quran is from God, right? We believe in it. But only those of intelligence will remember or will take heed. They will remember that what the point God is making now. Now, somebody might say, what is the essence of reading this verse to us? Chapter 3 verse 7 is giving you the highlight of knowing that in a language, to understand the context of a language, there is something we call literal and non-literal sense of language, right? So every language has it, whether Hausa language, whether Finnish language, whether English language, whether Chinese. There is something we have literal and non-literal. There's a word or speech somebody can say, it doesn't mean literally that do what he just said. It's not literal. It is non-literal. And sometimes it can be literal based on what? Context, if you understand the context of a language. So some of the topics I did in the past concerning the American vulgar word called shit. Like for people who are from America, they know what I'm talking about, the shit. Where the word shit can be used for good and bad in America and in a lot of contexts. You get the point. So, by this, in the Quran, when you go to chapter 16, verse 103, God says, وَهَذَا لِسَانٌ عَرَبِيٌّ مُبِينٌ. So God says, وَهَذَا لِسَانٌ. And this language is a clear Arabic language. Lisanun Arabiyyun Mubin. It is a clear Arabic language. That is the Quran. It's a clear book. Now, when it is clear, doesn't mean everything you take like this in the Quran, you just understand like this. After God telling you in chapter 3, verse 7, some verses are muhkamat, precise, that is literally, it can be understood. Then some verses are similar, but it doesn't mean literally. It has deep meaning. So, وَالرَّاسِخُونَ فِي الْإِلْمِ رَوَاسِخُونَ فِي الْإِلْمِ, those who are deeply rooted in knowledge, they will know that this verse is not a contradiction. It's come from God. So that is why chapter 4 verse 82 says, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ وَلَوْ كَانَ مِنْ إِنْدِ غَيْرِ اللَّهِ لَوَجِدُوا فِي اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا. Chapter 4 verse 82. Do they then not contemplate the Quran? Had it been from other than God, they will have found numerous contradictions inside. So you need knowledge, a great deal of knowledge, to be able to contemplate the Quran. Do you see the point? Good. So by dealing with verses of the Quran, you need what we call subject. Then you need context, and then you need the message. You need these three guidelines. This is from the experience of me being part of people who are rawasikhuna fil ilm. Right? I've deeply studied the Quran, and it took me 6 years to fully translate the Quran. And for people who have it, they can bear witness and testify for you and tell you what I've done with the help of God. I'm not boasting. فَأَمَّا بِنِيمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ. The favor of your Lord, you have to narrate it. God did it to me. That is it. Now, when I take you to chapter 18, verse 54, God said something interesting here. Before I go on, I'm just giving you guidelines to come into the conclusion of understanding what sujood is. But I'm giving you guidelines before we go to that point. Chapter 18, verse 54, God says, وَلَقَدْ صَرَّفْنَا فِي هَذَا الْقُرْآنِ لِلنَّاسِ مِنْ كُلِّ مَثَلٍ. Then he says, وَكَانَ الْإِنسَانُ أَكْثَرَ شَيْءٍ جَدَلًا. Now this is very interesting. God says, we have certainly conducted. That the word sarraf comes from the word the sarf. When they tell you sarf or tasrif, or so sarf, the way God has done with the verses, is a way of the way God has conducted it. Just like when you go to the how do you call it, the orchestra, or how do you call it, the one who stand in front of the people playing the violin and the guitar and the other stuff. You will see him carrying something and conducting the sound and doing this to this group, and when he does this, they understand what it means. So similarly, the Quran, God has done the sarf in the Quran. وَلَقَدْ صَرَّفْنَا فِي هَذَا الْقُرْآنِ. He has done the same way, like that. So you need great deal of knowledge to pinpoint verses from the Quran and concepts in the Quran, to join them together to understand what God is talking about. So God says, we have certainly conducted in this Quran of every example. Pay attention. Pay attention. Of every example for the people. So some people will tell you there is no concept of sujood, physical prostration in the Quran. Now the question is, why are we arguing when God says he has given us every example? Do you see my point? So let's go and ask the Quran, where is the example of the physical for sujood? This is how to end the argument. Remember, the Quran is al-furqan, the criterion for distinguishing right from wrong. Do you get the point? So now God says, وَكَانَ الْإِنسَانَ أَكْثَرَ شَيْءٍ جَدَلًا. But the human being disputes most things. The human being will always dispute, argue. It's a nature of the human being. You understand? God has given every example, but a human being, when he decides not to believe, he cannot believe. This is why when I start my lectures, I read to you or recite to you chapter 18, verse 29. It says, قُلِ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. The truth is from your Lord, so whoever wills, let him believe. And whoever wills, let him disbelieve. Nobody is forced to believe. Now, so we are going to use 3 verbs from the Quran which actually qualifies the word sujood or sajada or Saajidiin or sujada. 3 verbs which actually qualifies the word sujood to mean to prostrate, to fall down, prostration. So I'm going to break it down. But first, we need to understand. Hey, Salim, first, we need to understand what is a verb. Now, when we say verb, verb is an action word or a doing word. It's a word used in action. So from verbs, later on we get adjectives and then we get nouns. Right? Now, so that word, the verb of what? Sujood is sajada. That is a verb. So now this verb, I'm going to use 3 verbs from the Quran, and then we are going to highlight these 3 verbs and then check them in context of where they appear with the word sujood or sajada or sujada. Then we see, is it a physical attribute or not? So bear with me. 3 words. Which are the words? One is KHARRA. The second one is waqa'a. The third one is Ul'qiya. First one is KHARRA. Second one is waqa'a. Third one is Ul'qiya. These 3 verbs in Arabic language found in the Quran, they are verbs. I'll show you where they can be found in the Quran. They are verbs. And whenever these verbs are used next to the word sujood or sajada or saajidiin or sujada, then you see the clear meaning of a physical prostration. So bear with me. Now, when we say verb, it is the word class that serves as the connotation of a sentence. It is an action word or a doing word. A content word that denotes an action, occurrence, or state of existence. That is a verb. Right? In Arabic, we say fi'il. Fi'il, that is action, that is act, is fi'il. Then we have fi'il amr, fi'il madi, past tense, present tense, or whatever we have you. So in English, we say a verb. Right? Good. Salam, brother Jasim Al-Katan. Now, the first word we are going to deal with is KHARRA. The first one. What does KHARRA mean? According to the Quran, it means to fall down, or to fall over. That is the word KHARRA. Where is it used? Chapter 16, verse 26. Let's see what God says. Chapter 16, verse 26. The word KHARRA. God is talking about the disbelievers and how he deals with them with the punishment. So in the context, he says, Qad makara allazina min qablihim fa'ata Allahu bunyanahum min al-qawaidi. Then he says, فَخَرَّ عَلَيْهِمُ السَّقْفُ مِنْ فَوْقِهِمْ. The context is saying, قَدْ مَكَرَ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ فَأَتَى اللَّهُ بُنْيَانَهُمْ مِنَ الْقَوَائِدِ فَخَرَّ عَلَيْهِمُ السَّقْفُ. Then it says, مِنْ فَوْقِهِمْ, above them. So what does the translation say? Let's see in context. It's talking about disbelievers. Right? Salam, brother Mufassir. It's talking about disbelievers. So God says those before them had already schemed. When you say makara, is to scheme, to do something evil, right? But God approached their buildings, bunyanahum, their buildings or their structures. He approached their structures min al-qawaid, from the foundations. Just like when you build a house, you build a foundation first before you build the house, the structure, bunyan, right? So God approached it from the downs, just like we see earthquake, it shake buildings. This is how God approached. So the roof, the sakfu, when you say sakfu, that is the roof of a house in Arabic. So sakfu, above them, fawqihim, kharra alayhim. The word kharra, it fell down on them. It fell down on them. So this is kharra as a verb used here, to fall down. That is kharra, to fall, something which is up and falls down. That is kharra. Do you see the context here? Good. So in this context, the word kharra as a verb is used from the Quran, which means to fall down. But this is not used in the context of sujood, but we are deducing the meaning of what it means according to God. Then again, the second meaning, Chapter 22 verse 31. God says, be true to God without associating others with him. And whoever associates with others with God, then it is as if he had fallen. The word used there is KHARRA. He had fallen, KHARRA, from the sky. So when we say KHARRA, it is something which is up and goes down. It is standing up and goes down. So KHARRA, fall from the sky, and the birds, we know birds fly from the sky, and the birds snatch him, or the wind sweep him down into a remote area. So by this context, we can say fall over or fall down. The third meaning, chapter 25 verse 73. And whom, when reminded by the verses of their Lord, is talking about the believers. Salam Muktabul Hussein. Yeah, Salam Menas Khan. Yes. And whom, when reminded by the verses of their Lord, they do not let them fall over. They do not let the verses of God fall over. Right? The verses are being recited, so they did not let them fall over, deaf and dumb and blind. They do not let the voice of God fall over or fall off. Right? This is a non-literal sense. This is the KHARRA, like when it goes. When somebody is talking to you, you let it fall on deaf ears. So that's why we say fall on deaf ears, or fall over. Right? Deaf and blind. Right? So in chapter 25 verse 73, the word KHARRA, it says yakhiru alayha. Yakhiru alayha. Good. So that is the word KHARRA as a verb in the Quran, the fi'l. It means something to fall down, something which is coming and falling down, right? Or fall off, or fall over, or fall down. Now, the second word we are going to see is waqa'a. 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 The waw, the qaf, and the ain. Then it can be used also as qaw. That is the qaf and the ain. Qaw. Now this qaw comes from the word waqa'a, and they are both used in the Quran. Right? It means to fall upon, go down, or come upon something. Right? To come upon something, or to go down, or to fall upon something. That is waqa'a or qaw. That is what it means. So chapter 27 verse 82, God says, and when the word comes upon them, waqa'a alayhim. Waqa'a al-qawla alayhim. When the word comes upon them. So it comes. Yeah, James Ada, that's right. You understand? So then waqa'a al-qawla alayhim. That is, the word falls upon them or comes upon them. Right? We will bring forth for them a creature from the earth. That is the creature in form of a tool, which we have now, the computer. I'll come to this topic later. I'll discuss this kind of topic later. From the earth, telling them that the people were not certain of our verses, our signs, that is of the Quran. Then again, this same waqa'a is used in chapter 7 verse 71. He said, filth and wrath have fall upon you or come upon you. Waqa'a alaykum. Waqa'a alaykum. Filth and wrath have come upon you, or fall upon you, or came down upon you. Right? In the context, from your Lord. Are you arguing with me concerning names which you and your fathers have named, for which God has not sent down any authority? Therefore wait, indeed, I am among those waiting with you. So in this context, the word waqa'a is used as a verb, and it means to come upon something, something coming from up on you. Then chapter 7 verse 134, the word waqa'a is also used, and when the punishment came upon them or fell upon them, right? Fell upon them. Do you see? So that is, in this context, like that, it means waqa'a alayhim. They said, O Moses, invoke your Lord for us by what he has entrusted to you. If you remove the punishment from us, we will believe you, and we will send the children of Israel along with you. So waqa'a alayhim means a punishment coming from upside from God, and down on you. So up, down. Do you see? To fall upon, or to go down on you, or to come upon you. That is waqa'a alayhi. So now, this is the second verb. So the third verb is alqa. This alqa is used in the Quran, and we are going to see the alqa. Out of alqa, we have the word ul'qiya. Ul'qiya. So bilarakat alqa. Alif, lam, qa, and ya. Alqa. Right? So it means to cast, to throw, or to drop. To cast something, to throw something, or to drop something. That is alqa. Right? So chapter 20 verse 65, they said, "Oh Moses, either you throw, or we will be the first to what? Alqa, to throw." When Moses came to face the magicians, right, in the house of Pharaoh, concerning the display of miracle and sorcery, right, he threw his stick and it became a snake. So that is the alqa, to throw something down. So the thing is up and you drop it. The thing is up and you cast it. The thing is up and then you throw it. So from up, down, right? Alqa or ul'qiya. Then chapter 20 verse 20 is, so it says, so he threw it, and then it became a moving snake, a snake moving. He threw the stick, his stick, he threw it, and then it became, or you can say he cast it, and then it became a what? A snake moving. Or he dropped it, and it became a snake moving. You see the context. So three meanings for the same word, but it all fits in the context, right? Then apart from that, chapter 7 verse 150, and he threw the tablets. That is, he Moses, when he came back to his people, he threw the tablets, right? Alqa, he threw the tablet, or he dropped the tablet, or he cast the tablets, and seized his brother by the hand, pulling him toward him. So the word alqa, you understand, in such context. So he threw it down. That is to throw something. So which means you are holding that thing from upside, you threw it down. Or you are holding that thing from upside, you dropped it down. Or you are holding that thing upside and you cast it down. So that is the word alqa as a verb in the Quran, right? Which is an action word. So now we have seen these three verbs I gave you, the three verbs. And I showed you we have kharra, we have waqa'a, that is qaw, then we have alqa, it can be ul'qiya, right? So these three verbs, we are going to deduce them and see wherever they've been used with the word sujood or sajada or saajidiin, or what sujada, to see. Does it mean a physical attribute sometimes or not? We are going to find out. So now, after seeing all these three meanings, let's insert the three verbs in the context of sujood to see wherever they appear with sujood, what does sujood will mean, or what will the word sujood mean? Let's see. Now, when you go to chapter 15 verse 28, that word waqa'a is used here in another form as qaw. Remember, the word qa'un comes from the word waqa'a. So let's see chapter 15 verse 28, then we check till verse 30, and let's see what God says. And mind you, wherever the word sujood appears, I will just put dash. I will mention it in Arabic. I will not mention it in English. Then I give you the benefit of the doubt. Then you will see if there is actually a physical prostration in the Quran or not. Let's see. So chapter 15 verse 28 to verse 30. Right? That is Suratul Hijr 28 to verse 30. Let's see what God says. God says, وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ الْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي خَالِقٌ بَشَرًا مِنْ صَلْصَالٍ مِنْ حَمَإٍ مَسْنُونٍ. Then he says, فَإِذَا سَوَّيْتُهُ وَنَفْخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي. Then he says, فَقَوْ. Then he uses the word فَقَوْ فَقَعُ لَهُ سَاجِدِينَ. فَقَعُ لَهُ سَاجِدِينَ. Then he says, now the verb came. فَسَجَدَ الْمَلَائِكَةُ كُلُّهُمْ أَجْمَعُونَ. Now let's check what it says. The translation. And when your Lord said to the angels, I will create a human from argil of an aged man, which is a clay, right? It is similarly repeated in chapter 38, verse 71 to 73. These verses I'm reading similarly repeated there with choice of words, right? Then it says, and when I have organized him and blown into him from my spirit, then ka'u, that is fall down, fall. It comes from the word waka'a, fall or fall down. Do you see the meaning here? Fall down or go down. Then go down before him or to him. Then it's mentioned the word Saajidiin. So you can choose to put the word, they fell down to make obeisance. They fell down to show submission. They fell down in prostration. It's still the same context. But there's a physical act there. They fell down. So for God to elaborate further for you, then the verse 30, he says, Fasajada, he brought the verb. Fasajada al-malaikatu kulluhum ajma'un. Do you see? And then the angels prostrated, all of them entirely. All of them prostrated. There's no exception. Somebody will say, oh, except Iblis. Iblis was not an angel. Chapter 15, verse 27. He was a jinn. He was created as a jinn, not an angel. Right? So people who don't understand that concept, when you check my topic concerning free will and who is the devil, you see I've explained all this concept there. But this is not the topic for it now. Right? So now, God is explaining that word, the sujood, the sajada as a verb, is a what? In this context, it means they fell down in what? To make obeisance, to show submission, or in prostration. All the context makes sense, but there's a physical act. It's a physical thing they did. They fell down to show that submission. So the word sajada can also means prostrate. Good. Now, let's move on. So we have seen the word waka'a, that is kaw. When it's shortened, it's kaw. It comes from the verb waka'a, it's still in context. Then again, we use the word alqa, the second verb, alqa. We are going to use the alqa together with the word sujood and see, is it in the context of a physical prostration when they are both used in the same verse? Can it be used for prostration? Yes or no? Let's find out. When we say alqa or ul'qiya, it means to throw, to drop or drop down or cast. Right? So we go in the context of chapter 26, verse 46 to 48. Chapter 26, verse 46 to 48. Let's see what God says. God says, for ul'qiya saharatu Saajidiin. For ul'qiya as-saharatu Saajidiin. Qalu amanna bi rabbil alamin. Then verse 48 says, Rabbi Musa wa Harun. Rabbi Musa wa Harun. Now, this same context of verses can be found again in chapter 7, verse 120 to 102, repeated when Moses defeated the magicians. After they did their magic and charmed the snakes, he dropped one stick, and it became a snake and devoured all the magicians' snakes. So now they have to submit. They have to show submission. So physically, they dropped to the ground. So what did they do? The sorcerers dropped down. They threw themselves down. They dropped down themselves. They dropped down. Then the word Saajidiin came, just like we saw about the angels. Saajidiin, they fell down, they dropped down, same thing. They dropped down, Saajidiin. This is a physical act. Then they uttered, they said, we have believed in the Lord of the worlds, the Lord of Moses and Aaron. So that's a physical act of sujood here, in this context. Again, the third verb. Sorry, let's not go the third word. You can see the similar explanation of the Ul'qiya found in chapter 20 verse 70. Chapter 20 verse 70. The sorcerers drop down Ul'qiya sujadan. So that sujadan qualifies the word Ul'qiya as a prostration. I'll come to that. Saying we have believed in the Lord of Aaron and Moses. That is to show submission, to make obeisance, but in a physical form, an act. Good. So the third verb is KHARRA. Now this is where it eliminates all doubt about a physical sujood in salah. I told you my next topic is about salah, and I'll show you where there is a physical act of sujood, prostration. So this third verb eliminates all that doubt. So keep in check. So the word KHARRA, it means to fall down, to fall or over or fall. That is KHARRA. That is how it's used in the Quran. Right? This is the verb. Now we are going to use it together with the word sujood in the same context and see, is it a physical act or not? Do you see? You understand? So let's see. Chapter 17, verse 107. It says, say, believe in it or do not believe. Indeed, those who were given the knowledge before it, that is the Quran, when it is recited to them, yakhiruna, they fall down. Yakhiruna lil azkani, just for God to show you that there's a physical movement of the body. So they fall down to the chins. This is your chin. They fall down to the chins, going down. Because when I go down and put my head, my chin follows me. So this is a physical movement. So God is telling you the word yakhiru comes from the word KHARRA as a verb. Yakhiruna is a group. So they fall down. Do you see? They fall down to their chins for God to show you there's a physical movement of the body going with the chin downwards. They fall down to the chins. It didn't say on the chins. You are not falling on your chins like this. No, to the chins. Because when you go down with your head, all your head, your chin is also down. So they go down, they fall down to the chins. They fall down, they fall over to the chins. Then the word sujadan comes. So I told you I will not be putting the word prostration there. I will put in to make obeisance, to show submission, and in prostration. These three meanings of sajada. You can choose to put whatever, but at the end of the topic, you will know if there's a physical act or not in the Quran. So now they fall down to their chins, sujadan. You can see the word sujud, when it's used with the word KHARRA, which is a physical act, it happens. It's a physical act. You can do physical sujud. I'm not saying all the time sujud means physical, to show submission physically. No, not always. But I will show you how it works. Chapter 19, verse 58. God talks about the prophets. Then he says, when the verses of the Rahman, the gracious, were recited to them, then he says, kharru. He used the word kharru sujadan. Kharru means they fell down. The prophets of God, kharru, they fell down. The word kharra is a verb. It's an act of falling. To fall down, to fall over. So they fall down. In what? Sujadan. Sujadan and weeping. It's a physical act. And this act, they did it in their salat. According to chapter 19, verse 58 to 59. Check in the context. It is in their salat they did this act. In their salah. And I'll explain in my next lecture, inshallah. Do you see it? It's a physical act in your salah to do sujood. To go down in prostration by putting your head down. I'll give you all the evidences. Let's not be in the rush. Again, chapter 32, verse 15. God says, only those who believe in our verses are those whom, when reminded thereby, they fall down. Kharru. It comes from the word kharra, because this is a plural form. Kharru means a group doing. Kharru. Kharra. They fall down. Sujadan. Sujadan, to make obeisance, to show submissions to in prostration. Same context. So it is prostration. If you like, take the sujadan out, put the word, if you like, put your word to show submission, to make obeisance. If you like, don't use prostration. But what is that act of falling down to show somebody submission? What is that act in English? Define that word in English. One word. I dare the people who say there's no physical act of prostration in the Quran. I dare them. Let them define one word. When I fall down to somebody to show my submission, what is that word described at in English? How do you pronounce that word? So somebody help me, please. Type it for me. Now let's continue. And glorify with praise of their Lord. When they fall down, and glorify with praise of their Lord. And they are not arrogant. Only an arrogant person doesn't fall down to praise God. And then he will tell you, oh, no, God didn't say I should do it physically. Oh, did you really study the book? You're welcome, James Adam. Now let's continue. Chapter 12, verse 100. Now we can see whenever we use the word KHARRA together with the word SUJUUD, it is in context. There's no excuse here. Unless if somebody doesn't know the grammar of Arabic. Yes, there's no excuse. It's a physical act in this context. I'm not saying always sujood means you should go down, fall down on your head. No. You can show submission by not falling down. But when it comes in the context of this, even in your salat, it is talking about a physical act. Just fall down to God. It's to show your submission. That's why to a king, you fall down in front of a king to show him that you have submitted. It is different from taslim or aslim. That type of submission is different. So I'm going to explain. So let's take the example of the king's palace. That is Yusuf alayhi salam and his family. When they came to visit him in the king's palace, chapter 12, verse 100. When they came to him, he raised his two parents upon the throne. They came and then he raised them on the throne. And they fell down before him. They fell down. Kharru is a physical act. The verb is kharra, to fall down, to fall. They fell down in front of him. In sujadan. If you like, put the word obeisance. I don't care. Put the word to show submission. I don't care. But it is still prostration. That word, one word to define that action in English is called prostration. Do you see? So they fell down to him. Do you see the physical act? Good. Now, it is not only sujood that you go down. Even ruku'u, according to the Quran, to do ruku'u, you go down. You understand? Even ruku'u, to go down. Right? So now, in the context of chapter 38, verse 24, and David thought we were testing him, so he sought the forgiveness of his Lord, and kharra, that is harru, he fell down. The word kharra is a physical act. That's why when I started the topic, I started with the guidelines telling you about the context, understanding a language, grammar, a unit to help you get the interpretation, understanding literal and non-literal. This is a literal word. Kharra is a literal word, right? To fall. So now God says, so he sought the forgiveness of his Lord and fell down in ruku'u. That is raki'an, and repented. He did a physical act by falling down in what? Genuflection. That is to bow down. It's another form of going down. But this time it will be on your knees when you are doing ruku'u. You understand? So now, We can see that whenever the word KHARRA is used with the word ruku'un or SUJUUD, it's a physical act. It's no more about, it's not physical. No, it's a physical act when they are used together in the same form. So it is based on the two forms that can explain other verses to you. Whenever it talks about the angels, you already know. The angels have been explained, chapter 15, verse 29, that it is a physical act they did. I don't care whether you ask me how did the angels do their, do I need to be there to see how their head look like? I'm talking about me, the human being. If God says fall down, I can see physically how we do it. Do you see the point? Good. So understanding the sujood. To understand the sujood, this is what we need to do. First of all, when we go to chapter 2, verse 34, to talk about the angels and what God told the angels. Let's see what God says. Chapter 2, Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 34. What did God say to the angels? Chapter 2, verse 34. God says, وَإِذْ قُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ أَسْجُدُوا لِلْآدَمَ فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ أَبَى وَاسْتَكْبَرَ وَكَانَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ. Now let's take only this verse. Remember, when you are dealing with the Quran, you don't just take one verse and think you understand every concept. It doesn't work like that. When you're dealing with the Quran, make sure you have encompassed every knowledge of the book in its whole compass first, before you address a topic, like I do. Whenever you see me addressing a topic, I'm not coming out of ignorance to just take one verse and then come to you and then shout and go. No, I know what I'm talking about. I've translated the Quran for 6 years and I know what I'm talking about. Whenever you see me dealing with a topic, there are topics I've already gone over and over and over before addressing to the public. And this is why after addressing, I tell you, any scholar out there who thinks I'm lying, I only call for a live dialogue. Do you see any of them stepping out? Good. Chapter 2, verse 34. If you are going to only use this word and put your assumption and say, oh, the sujood here doesn't mean physical, which means you only believe in part of the Quran and reject part of the Quran. Because the Quran explains itself. It doesn't need your own opinion or desires. So when God is explaining, he gives us the answer clearly in the Quran. And we are going to see how God explained the word sujood, whether it's a physical act the angels did or not. He's going to tell us, right? So let me not put any word. Don't put any word. Let's hear what God has to tell us. So God says, and when we said to the angels, sujood to Adam, do sujood to Adam. When we said to the angels, do sujood to Adam, what happened? They did the sujood. They did the sujood. I'm only going to be putting Arabic. Then at the end, we'll see the clear meaning there. You can see in this context, he didn't bring the cow or KHARRA or Ul'qiya there. But because he has already explained that in other verses, you need to finish studying all the Quran before you can come to the conclusion and say, oh, okay, if I join all these verses where he's talking about the angels doing sujood to Adam, one verse here stands out. It tells me they actually fell down to show submission to Adam. So now I'm going to help you with the guidelines. Chapter 2, verse 34. And when we said to the angels, do sujood to Adam, then they did sujood, except Lucifer, Iblis. He refused and became arrogant and was of the disbelievers. Apart from that, chapter 17, verse 61. And when we said to the angels, do sujood to Adam, they did the sujood, except Iblis. He said, shall I do sujood to whom you created from clay? Now, I know you are wondering, what is the sujood this guy is talking about? I'll help you. Chapter 7, verse 11 to verse 12. And we suddenly created you and formed you. And then we said to the angels, do sujood to Adam. So they did the sujood, except Iblis. He was not of those who did the sujood. That is, he said, God told Iblis, what prevented you not to do sujood when I commanded you? He said, he the devil, I am better than him. You created me from fire and you created him from clay. So that is why you didn't do the sujood. So what is the sujood? We want to understand. God, please help us. Because you said chapter 16 verse 89, your book is a clarification for all things. So please help us, God. Chapter 15, verse 28, and I'm going to read to verse 33. Is God going to clarify? Yes or no? Let's see. Chapter 15, verse 28 to verse 33. And when your Lord said to the angels, indeed, I will create a human from the argil of an aged man, that is clay, and when I have organized him and blown into him from my spirit, then fall down. Listen, that sujood I keep putting in the context from different verses. Sujood, sujood, I keep saying. God is explaining what the sujood is. Then he says, and when I have organized him and blown into him from my spirit, then fall down before him in Saajidiin. So all the context I've been reading, it keeps saying sujood, do sujood, do sujood, do sujood. In that context, it's talking about a physical act. So fall down in prostration in that context. So sajada becomes prostration in this context. That's a physical act. Verse 30. So the angels did the sujood. You see, they did the sujood, all of them entirely, because they are angels. Remember, they are angels, except Iblis. Why? He was not an angel. Chapter 18, verse 50. Chapter 15, verse 27. He was a jinn. But God did that test to test him. So except Lucifer, that is Iblis, he refused to be with those who did the sujood. So do you see the physical act there? That is why God was questioning him. Why he didn't show the submission by going down. Do you see sujood in this context? Then he said, oh, Iblis, why are you not with those who did the sujood? Iblis said, I am not to do sujood to a human when you have created him from what? An argil of an aged man, that is clay. So in this all context, which is similarly repeated in chapter 38, verse 71 to 76, the sujood, God keep talking about the malaikatu. They did the sujood, is all about falling down, a physical act. Let the Quran explain itself. Simple. That's all I exhort you. Don't use your opinion. Don't use opinion. Just study Arabic a bit and then deal with the context and see how God explains his own book. Simple. Now, we are going to deal with the literal and non-literal sujood. Yes, sujood sometimes can be literal and sujood sometimes can be non-literal. So I'm going to help you to deduce that. But let the Quran explain itself. Then you get the meaning. Chapter 27, verse 24. Remember when the bird, the hudhud of Sulaiman alayhi salam went scouting and he found the Queen of Sheba. You remember? Now that Queen of Sheba, the bird went and found her and the people doing sujood to the sun other than God. And the devil has adorned their deeds to them and turned them away from the way, so they are not guided. Chapter 27, verse 25 says, they do not sujood to God. Then he says, who brings forth what is hidden in the heavens and the earth and knows what you conceal and what you declare? Now let's check the context of these verses. Before I started, I put the word sajada as a verb and told you the meaning of sajada. It means to make obeisance, to show submission, to prostrate or bow down. That is the meaning of sajada. But to deduce which of the meaning we can put in every context, you need to understand the form of context it's used. So we are going to deduce and see. We are going to deduce from chapter 27, verse 24 to verse 25. We are going to deduce and see the context in which it's used. Then we can see, is it to make obeisance? Is it to show submission? Or is it to make prostration? We are going to see. I found her and a people making obeisance. We can put it. It fits the context. Making obeisance to the sun other than God. And the devil has adorned their deeds to them and turned them away from the way. So they are not guided. We can choose to put the word making obeisance. We can choose to put the word showing submission. Or we can choose to put the word prostrating. It is all in context. There is no foul play there. No foul play when you choose the three meanings of sajada to put there. Verse 25. They do not make submission. They do not make obeisance to God. Or you can choose to put, they do not show submission to God. Or you can choose to put, they do not prostrate to God. It's all in the context. Whether you take it physical or non-physical, it still doesn't change anything. Do you see the point? Who brings forth what is hidden in the heavens and the earth and knows what you conceal and what you declare? So in this context, the three meanings, whichever of the meaning you put there is in line with the meaning of the Quran, whether literal or non-literal. Do you see the point? Then apart from that, I take you to chapter 41 verse 37. God says, among his signs are the night and the day, as well as the sun and the moon. Then he says, do not do sujood to the sun or to the moon, but do sujood to God, the one who created them, if it is him you are worshipping. That is 7. So now in this context, we want to put the meaning of sujood. We want to deduce the meaning here. Now the word sajada has 3 meanings: to make obeisance, to show submission, to prostrate. So among his signs are the night and the day, as well as the sun and the moon. Then he says, La tajjudu lishamsi wala lil qamar. So do not prostrate to the sun or to the moon. Or you can use, do not make obeisance to the sun or to the moon. Or you can use, do not show submission to the sun or to the moon. It is still in context. There's nothing wrong when you use prostrating there. There's nothing wrong when you use to make obeisance. There is nothing wrong when you use to show submission. Do you see? Because when you understand Arabic and you understand the context of grammar in Arabic, you don't struggle doing this. Do you see my point? So here, God says, but asjudu lillahi. Asjudu lillahi. So that is, you can say prostrate to God, or to make obeisance to God, or to show submission to God, the one who created them, if it is him you are worshipping. The context still remained, whether literal or non-literal. Here, it doesn't affect the meaning. Again, we are still talking about literal and non-literal. Sujood. We have the word sujadan. Like I told you, the verb is sajada. Now, when we say sujadan, you can, in some context, when it's used in the Quran, you need to check the context in which it is used. It doesn't always mean literal. Sometimes it's literal, sometimes it's non-literal. You just need to check the context it's used in. An ignorant person will think, because I said in some context it is a physical act, that means anywhere sujood appears in the Quran, it means physical. That is an ignoramus person. You see? So now, when you take the word sujadan, in the context I'm going to use, it means obeisance. It is physical, but it doesn't mean go down with your head or fall down. No. I'm going to show you. I take you to chapter 2, verse 25. Chapter 2, verse 58. Let's see the context here. Chapter 2, verse 58. God says in that verse, وَادْخُلُوا الْبَابَ سُجَّدًا وَقُولُوا حِطَّةٌ نَغْفِرُ لَكُمْ خَطَايَاكُمْ. God is saying, enter the gates or the doors or the gates, like gates, the gates. When we say gate of a house or door of a house, so he says, enter the gate in obeisance. In obeisance. It doesn't mean put your head down to do sujood. Check the context. Now, what is obeisance? Obeisance is the act of obeying, dutiful or submissive behavior with respect to another person. You are showing your respect to God. You understand? It is the same word can be used sajada, sujadan, but the meaning, because it has multiple meanings, you don't just use the literal always. It is the non-literal act of prostrating. That is sujood. It is a non-literal act of sujood. But it doesn't mean prostrate the head whilst you are entering the door. That is not the point. So God says, enter the gate in obeisance. That is sujadan. So obeisance in this context, obeisance has, the word obeisance has two meanings. It can mean bending your head, or it can mean obeying by being what? Submissive with respect to another person. So in this context, you are respecting God. So by that context, then God says you should say what? Khibtatun. Khibtatun means we are relieved. To be relieved. Qalu khibtatun. Then say we are relieved or relief. You understand? So that is an act of what? Showing submission. But it doesn't mean physically go down, put your head and enter the gate. That is not the point. Now, apart from that, similarly, when you go to chapter, let's say chapter 4, verse 154, Surah An-Nisa, verse 154, where God says, وَقُلْنَا لَهُمْ أَدْخُلُوا الْبَابَ سُجَّدًا وَقُلْنَا لَهُمْ لَا تَعْدُوا فِي السَّبْتِ. Fi Sabt. Now let's check the context. God is saying, and we said to them, enter the gates sujadan. Enter the gates sujadan. That is, enter the gate in obeisance. Now I told you the word sajada, it can mean to show submission, it can mean to make obeisance, it can mean to prostrate. In this context, we are not using the word prostrate. In this context, you are using the word in obeisance. You are entering the gate in obeisance, which is non-literal sense of what? Sujood. Do you see the point? So now in this context, it means obeisance being what? Submissive. By surrendering to God. Now, apart from that, also, then I take you to chapter 7, verse 161, where God told them, he told the children of Israel, وَادْخُلُوا الْبَابَ سُجَّدًا نَغْفِرُ لَكُمْ خَطِيئَاتِكُمْ. So God says, enter the gate in obeisance. You enter the gate in obeisance, which is the non-literal sense of sajada, sujood. Enter the gate in obeisance. Wakulu, when you naghfir lakum khati'atikum. Ati'atikum. Then he said what? Naghfir lakum, we will forgive your what? Your mistakes. That is something you did as a fault or something. We will forgive them. So in this context, the sujadan doesn't mean put your head down, like prostrating. It is an act of showing your submission, but not like physically going down to enter the gate. So this is how you check the context of words in certain language unit. So apart from that, you can see in the context this sujadan is used. These three verses I just gave you. It is not about a physical prostration. But then I'm going to take you to other verses where it talks about a physical sujadan, which is a physical act of going down. So let's go and see. Chapter 19, verse 58. Chapter 19, verse 58. In that context, God says, إِذَا تُتُلَ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُ الرَّحْمَنِ خَرُّوا سُجَّدًا وَبُكِيًّا. In this context, it is a physical act. The word kharru qualifies the word sujadan. So it means fall down. Fall down. Kharru sujadan wabukiya. So they fall down in what? Prostration. Because the word sajada also means prostration. So in this context, the word kharru qualifies the word sujadan to become a physical act. But God never told in the previous verses I read, chapter 2 verse 58, chapter 4 verse 154, chapter 7 verse 166. It didn't say kharru abawaba sujadan. It didn't say kharru abawaba sujadan. It didn't say fall down at the gate in prostration. He didn't use the word kharru there. So that word kharru or kharra will qualify the word sajada to become a physical act. Do you see the point? Now similarly, then I take it to another verse, which is chapter 20 verse 70. Let's see what God says. Chapter 20 verse 70, where it says, for Ul'qiya saharatu sujadan. Now in this context, the word ul'qiya qualifies the word sujadan to become a physical act. That is to fall down. So the magicians fell down in what? Sujood. So that is a physical act in this context when sujadan is used. Apart from that, chapter 12 verse 100, when the family of Joseph came to him, he raised them upon the throne and they fell down. Kharru sujadan. They fell down to him in what? Prostration. In that context, the word sujadan means a physical act of prostration because of the word kharru. They fell down, right? Then apart from that, we are going to check the sujadan in the context of chapter 48 verse 29, which is a physical act you can see with the naked eye. But what is the result of prostration? When a person prostrates, what results does he get from the physical act? We are going to see what it means. So chapter 48 verse 29, let's see what God says. That is Suratul Fatih. He says, Muhammadun Rasulullahi. Wallazina mahu ashiddahu ala al-kuffar. Ruhamhahu baynahu. Then he says, Tarahum rukka'an sujjada. Tarahum, you see them. Tarahum, you see a physical act. You are seeing them doing something physically. You see them. Tarahum rukka'an sujjadan. Yabtaguna fadlan min Allahi wa ridwana. Then he says, Simahum fi wujuhihim min athari sujud. Now let me read the translation here. You see something. God says Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, that is God, right? Those with him are strong against the disbelievers, but merciful among themselves, that is the believers. They are merciful to each other, but strong against the disbelievers. You see them, tarahum, you see them bowing down, rukka'an, bowing down, sujadan. In this act is a physical act. You see them doing it physically. In prostration, seeking the favor of God and what? Ridwana, the approver. Then he says, simahum, which means a sign or a mark. Simahum, fi wujuhim. This word fi can be used as on or it can be used or in. You can use the word in or on. In Arabic, based on context, it is used. So fi wujuhim, then it says min athari. Athari is sujud. The word athari, I'm going to break it down for you. The word athari in the Quran, it means trace or footprint, something which leaves a mark. So that word simahum qualifies the word athari in this context. The word simahum means the sign or mark, something which leaves a mark. Then the word athari is something which leaves a trace or footprint. So in this context, it's talking about the face. So it is the what? Trace. So you can see God says their mark on their faces is from the trace of what? Sujood. The trace of sujood. The word athari is singular, which is what? Trace. To leave a mark on something on your face. Right? A trace. You can see the trace of it. Right? So the athari sujood on their faces is from the trace of what? Prostration. So when you go to chapter 20 verse 84, the word athari is used as a footprint or trace. Right? When you go to chapter 20 verse 96, the word athari is used as footprint or trace. When you go to chapter 46 verse 4, athara in plural form is used. Athara, that is what? Traces. Huh? That is traces of knowledge in that context. When he's talking about knowledge, bring me some traces of knowledge by which you talk. Chapter 18 verse 64, that is what? Footprints, athara. That is the footprints of Moses when he went with his servants to go and meet Zulkarnain, right? Then again, chapter 36 verse 12, footprint, athara, is talk about the same word in plural form. Then it is used as a verb in chapter 74 verse 24. Then he says yuther, that is yuther, as athar, yuther. So it's used as a verb which is traced, the traced sorcery, something which you can trace. It has the evidence of being seen. So God says in the context of chapter 48 verse 29, you see them bowing down, rukka and sujadan. Rukka and sujadan. You see them bowing down in prostration in this context, seeking the favor of God and approval. Then he says they are marked on their faces. You can use the word on for the word fi in Arabic. It can be fi or it can be what? On. On their faces or in their faces is from the trace, athari, sujood. The trace of what? Sujood. You see it physically by seeing the action. Now this is what eliminates the doubt here. That is their example in the Torah. In the Torah. And their example in the gospel is like a plant which produces its what? Tiller. Right? It's like a plant which produces its tiller. Then he says, then it strengthens and becomes thick and then ripens on its market, delighting the farmers. This is a metaphorical language. Now, what is God telling us here? In this concept, it is telling you their example, the example God just gave you, that you see them bowing down in prostration, seeking the favor of God and approval. Their mark on their faces is from the trace of sujood. Let's go and check. From the acclaimed book, people are claiming that is the Torah and the Gospel. That is not the 100% genuine book of God. That is called the Bible. But we are going there to confirm something. Is there any concept of physical prostration to God? Bowing down to prostrate? Yes or no? Let's go and find out. When you go to Genesis, when you go to the Bible, find the book of Genesis. That is what they call the acclaimed Torah. I don't believe it's the 100% Torah of God, because it has been, some verses have been interpolated, not from God. When you go to Deuteronomy chapter 34 verse 5 to verse 8, it tells you Moses died. But they are claiming Moses wrote that book. But then if he's dead, how come he's writing? Do you understand? So some things have been invented which is not from God. But anything God confirms from the Quran is the word of God. According to chapter 10 of the Quran verse 37. God says the Quran is a confirmation of what is before it. So if Quran confirms something which you find in any other book, in ancient book, it is the word of God. Now, when you go to Genesis chapter 24 verse 26 and chapter 24 verse 48, the two servants of Abraham had servants. One is Laban. They prostrated and they bowed down and prostrated to God. You find it there. Genesis chapter 24 verse 26 and then Genesis chapter 24 verse 48. You see two servants of Abraham. They bowed down and prostrated themselves to God. You can write it down. Apart from that, Moses, Prophet Musa alayhi salam, himself, he bowed down and prostrated to God. Exodus chapter 34 verse 8. Exodus chapter 34 verse 8. He bowed down his head and prostrated to God. Then David alayhi salam, Dawood, First Chronicles chapter 29 verse 20. First Chronicles chapter 29 verse 20. David bowed and his people bowed down and prostrated to God. Jehoshaphat chapter 2 of Chronicles, Second Chronicles chapter 20 verse 18. He also bowed down his head and prostrated to God. Then apart from that, Uzair, that is Ezra, Nehemiah chapter 8 verse 6. He also bowed down his head and prostrated to God with his congregation. They bowed down to God. They bowed down and prostrated their head to the ground. It is there. Apart from that, Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, himself, Matthew chapter 26 verse 39, he bowed down and prostrated his head to God himself in prayer. He was praying and he bowed down his head and prostrated his head to the ground for God. So when God is saying that is their example in the Torah and their example in the gospel is like a plant which produces its land, because the more you do prostration, the more you keep doing it. I think my camera doesn't show me well, but if you see, you can see some trace of prostration on my face here. Now, the more you do it, it will leave a mark on your head. Now, for people who are usually doing it, it gives the mark on the head. You see the mark left. Then it becomes thicker by time as you're doing prostration. So it is a sign which delights the person who serves God. Salam, Liman, Imrana. So any servant of God who does that, you see the mark on his head. It tells you that this guy is a servant of God because he bows down to God and prostrates to God. It leaves a mark. So it delights whoever has it in his head. It delights him. He gets happy. You understand? When he has it. You understand? Because he knows it's just like when God made a comparison of like a plant which produces its tyler. Then it strengthens and becomes thick and then ripens on its market, delighting the farmers. So when a farmer is trying to grow a plant, the moment it grows to a certain point, he is happy to see it grow. You understand? So similarly, it is an act where you do physically to show your submission to God, right? Then again, when we say sujood, in this context, we have seen the literal one, and then we have seen the non-literal one. Another literal sense of sujood can be found in chapter 22, verse 26 of the Quran. That is Surah Al-Hajj, chapter 22, verse 26. Let's see what God told Ibrahim alayhi salam concerning sujood. So God says, and when we assign the site of the house to Abraham, that do not associate anything with me and purify my house. We all know the house of God. وَأَنَّ الْمَسَاجِدَ لِلَّهِ فَلَا تَدْعُوا مَعَ اللَّهِ أَحَدًا. Thank you very much. When we say house of God, that is the masjid where we worship God, we serve God, a place of what? Submission, place of showing your submission, prostration, obeisance. That is masjid, where you establish the salat. And when we assigned the site of the house to Abraham, that do not associate anything with me, because you are not supposed to do shirka in the house of God. Chapter 72 verse 18, do not invoke anyone along with God in the houses of God, right? So do not associate anything with me and purify my house. When we say house of God, it doesn't mean God is there and sleeping there. That's not the point. You understand? And purify my house for those who walk around and those who stay, qa'imina, and you can translate that stand, and those who bow down in what? Sujood, in prostration. They bow down in prostration, and as a physical act, just like we saw Muhammad alayhi salam with his people, chapter 48, verse 29. Right? So similarly, the verse can be transferred to chapter 2, verse 125. Let's see what God says. Chapter 2, verse 125. Where God says, and when we made the house a resort for mankind, for the people, and security, so take a place of salat, that is a place of prayer, from the place of Abraham. He says, وَإِذْ جَعَلْنَا بَيْتًا مَثَابَةً لِلنَّاسِ وَأَمْنًا وَاتَّخِذُوا مِنْ مَقَامِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مُصَلَّى. You take a place of prayer where you establish the salat. Right? Musalla. Is different from musalli. Musallin. When you say musallin, it's talking about people. But musalla can be used for a place where you establish salat. right? So you take from the place of Abraham a musalla. Then what he says, وَإِدْنَا إِلَىٰ إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَإِسْمَاعِيلَ أَنْ طَهِّرَ بَيْتِيَ لِلطَّائِفِينَ وَالْعَاكِفِينَ وَالرُّكَعِ السُّجُودِ. And then we made the house a resort for mankind and security. So take a place of prayer from the place of Abraham, for we entrusted to Abraham and Ishmael that purify my house for those who roam and those who abide, as well as those who bow down in what? Prostration, sujood, in that act. In the masjid, that's why it's called masjid. Masjid, right? A place of sajada. A place of sajada. Masjid. For people who have studied Arabic, you know what I'm talking about. Just like we have a place where you keep books. In Arabic, a place where you keep books, you call it maktab, right? An office, maktab, right? A place where you do daras, you study, darasa. Then you say madrasa or madras, right? So for people who have studied Arabic, you know what I'm talking about. Now, I'll drink water, Smith Adam, thank you. Now, so we can see the context of literal sujood. When we say sujood, in some context, it's a literal thing. In some context, it can be non-literal sense, right? Then apart from that, we say Saajidiin. We have seen sujadan, which has two connotations. It can be used in obeisance. It can be used in prostration. Then we have sujood, which is in prostration. Then we have what? Saajidiin, which is also what? In prostration. Chapter 7, verse 120, when the magicians, they fell down in prostration. Then chapter 26, verse 46, chapter 26, verse, when the magicians fall down in prostration. Chapter 15, verse 29, when the angels fall down in prostration. Chapter 38, verse 72, when the angels fell down in prostration. So that is a literal sense of sujood, right? Muktabul Hussein says, does makam and makan mean the same thing? It depends. When we say makan, makan can be a position you have been given. Your makan is like a position you have been given to be, like let's say a rank, a type of makan. Then we have makam at the same time. This makam can be used in the sense of position, which is a physical position that can be assigned where you stay. But they are interchangeable. Makan and the maqam. One have the maqam has the qaf in the middle. The makan is the one with the kaf. So they are interchangeable, but it depends on context. It can be used. Okay, what are they doing? Okay. Hey, wait. Give me this. Give me this before you. Yeah, so let's go on. So Saajidiin, we've seen, if in the context of Saajidiin, we see prostration. In the context of sujood, we see physical prostration. In the context of sujadan, it can be physical or it can be what? Non-physical. Now, when a person tells you there is no such thing as prostration in the Quran, just take your time and ask him this word. Ask him this word. Tell him, define this act in one English word for me. If the person says there is no physical act of prostration in the Quran, right? Just ask him one simple question. Tell him, when someone falls down to show submission, if I fall down to show submission to somebody, let's say a king, or let's say my boss, he says I want to fire you, then I fall down in front of him, I fall down with my head, then I show to show submission that, oh please boss, please. That act, give me one word that describes that act from English or from Arabic. How do you pronounce it? For anybody who tells you there is no physical act of sujood, prostration in the Quran, I give you this assignment. Just ask such a person this question. To define this act for you in Arabic or English. Give you one word to describe it. It is prostration. In English, in Arabic, is sajada, sujood. You can take it or leave it. That is the truth. That's why it says, "Kul al-haqqu min rabbikum, faman sha'a falyu'min, wa man sha'a falyakfur." You cannot be forced. But you tell me I'm doing sujood to God and I'm a mushrik, or it's not in the Quran, then you lack common sense and you are ignorant. Simple. You're just ignorant. So that's why I say, I dare any scholar out there who thinks I'm here to just say my opinion. I'm not here to do my opinions. For people who are intellectuals and who have intelligence, they know what I represent. It's either I give you the logical proof or I stay quiet if I don't know. Simple. Now, so when we say prostration, it is the emotional equivalent of throwing your body to the ground in submission, to show submission. That is prostration. So yes, prostration is in the Quran, but it doesn't mean wherever you see the word sujood, it means the same thing. That is why the guidelines in chapter 3 verse 7 is there to help you. Some verses in the Quran are literal, they are precise, and some verses are similar, but it doesn't mean it is the same meaning. They have different meanings based on context. So you need to check the subject, study the context in order to know the meaning. But you don't just do that, you need to know the language. You get my point. That's why I use the English language to give you the example of beating around the bush, cut me some slack. You understand? Below the belt. They are all figments of speech in English language. So if I've never studied English language and I'll just go and take the dictionary and say I'm going to translate words, oh my God, what am I going to cause to people? Sina. Mita sina sana. Auzu billah. Sana. Ya mita. Okay. Sound hiva. Nadira, bude ko fanna. Aja. Barishin. Now, so now I'm going to take you in the concept whereby the word sujood or sajada, when it appears as a verb, it doesn't always mean a physical prostration. It can mean to make obeisance or to show your submission, by showing your submission but not going down, right? So I'm going to show you in the context they've been appeared. For instance, chapter 12 verse 4, when Yusuf alayhi salam, he had a vision, he had a dream that he saw the planets and the moon and the sun doing sujood to him, making sujood to him. In that context, they were showing submission. It is not like they were putting their head to the ground. They were showing him submission or making obeisance to him. But as a human being, if you see a vision, the vision always doesn't mean physically the way you see it in real life. Real life sense is different from what you see in vision. Let me give you an example. When you take chapter 12, when the prisoners were with Joseph in the prison, when one of them saw the dream that a bird was eating bread on his head, how did Joseph translate the dream for him? He said, you'll be killed. Simple. When the other one said, I saw myself squeezing alcohol, khamr, he told him what? You will be what? You will serve wine to the king. That is the job you'll be doing. So it doesn't mean when he saw himself squeezing wine, alcohol or fruits, it doesn't automatically mean that is what he was doing. No. But there is always a literal sense of something and non-literal. This is where you need to understand the language unit of every aspect of thing you are dealing with. When you are dealing with the Quran and you have never studied Arabic, how can you know what you're dealing with? Do you see my point? If you are only going to take dictionaries and then whatever have you, you are only going to be messing up yourself. And then you end up saying there's no physical prostration in the Quran, because you have not finished studying the Quran. You don't see context. You don't see how your words are used. So chapter 12 verse 4. He, Joseph, he saw the sun and the moon and the planets showing submission to him. But when it came into real life, God was going to interpret the dream for him in real life. Chapter 12 verse 99 to 100. God made his parents and his family came down and then fell down in prostration in front of him. But it doesn't mean the moon, the sun, and the planet were doing the same thing, like putting their head to the ground. It was a vision. So they were showing him submission. But as a human being, if you want to physically show somebody submission, you need to go down. If I go to the king's house and I want to show my submission, I need to fall down in front of him. It translates as submission. To show your submission, that is prostration. Sujood. If I go to God and I'm doing my salat, me going down is to tell God physically, I submit, to show my submission. Do you see how it works? Good. So, in the context of chapter 12 verse 4, the sujood you see there, it is not talking about the physical sujood. It's talking about showing your submission. The sun and the moon and the planet showing submission to Joseph in the dream. Do you know in the dream you can even see your shoes flying? Does that mean in real life they fly? Do you see the point I'm making? Apart from that, chapter 22 verse 18, God is claiming that every creature, heavens and earth, and everyone do sujood to him. Now this sujood in this context, it means to show submission, to make obeisance. Now how does everyone do? Somebody can say not every human being shows submission. Yes, they show. Wait till there's an earthquake, or the aeroplane is going to fall down, or wait till there's a bomb blast, or something terrible, accident is happening. Even an atheist on that day, he shows submission to God. He says, oh God, please, I believe you are there. Oh, forgive me, forgive me. So every creature, every living thing shows submission to God. They make sujood. But this sujood is not like a physical putting your head as sujood. In this context, chapter 22 verse 18, it is about showing your submission, making obeisance to God, surrendering something to him. Every creature, every living thing, everything does that to God. Then we have chapter 55 verse 6, where God says, وَالنَّجْمُ وَالشَّمْسِ وَالشَّجَرَ يَسْجُدَانِ. When he says the stars and the trees, they do sujood to God. This sujood, it is not a literal sense of sujood like the way you, the human being, are doing your sujood. No. That sujood is talking about they show their submission. This is why when they grow, they die, leaves drop, they do their things, the stars appear, they go, they show their submission to God. In that context. You understand? Then we go, chapter 16 verse 49. God says the heavens and the earth and the angels and the creatures, they all do sujood to him. That sujood is not like the way you, the human being, are doing. Use your common sense. Their sujood is different. Their act is to just show their submission to God by doing the way God asked them to do. Kaki kulle kofa barish. Na kusa kare waraka, I'm almost done. So the heavens and the earth and the angels and the creatures, they show submission to God. They show submission and they make obeisance by being dutiful to God. But you, the human being, if you want your boss to actually know that you are showing submission, you need to fall down to show him physically that, oh boss, I surrender to you, oh boss, now I will do, so that he will know from your remorse. By going down, you are showing him physically. Do you see how it works? Then again, chapter 96 verse 19, God says on the day of judgment, he will tell the angels to draw near to him. In what? In sujood. Now in that context, chapter 96 verse 90, it's not telling them to put their head down to the ground. That sujood he's mentioning there, it is an act of making obeisance, to show submission by being obeying what he told you. Which means don't obey the one being punished, obey the one giving you instructions. That is God. That's why chapter 66 verse 6, God says, La yasuna Allah ma amarahum. Whatever God will command the angels guarding the hellfire, they do not disobey him. They will do as he commanded. That is the sujood there. Then chapter 13 verse 15. This is the interesting part. God says everything and everyone, whether human, whether jinn, whether angel, everyone and everything, whether you believe in God or you do not believe in God, we do sujood to him by force, karahan wa tan'a, even willingly or unwillingly. It is not talking about the submission that taslim or aslim. That is different. That is, taslim is different from this sujood. This sujood is just the way God has designed you to act. You will act like that whether you like it or not. Do you understand? That is the act of showing the submission to the way God has created you. So whether we like it or not, we show that submission in terms of sujood to God. That is why he says even your shadows, they show that submission to God. That is why whenever the sun appears, my shadow must appear no matter what, even if I don't like it. So far as I'm walking in the sun, even if I don't like it, my shadow have to appear because I'm a human being. So this is the sujood you do to God. That is different. Now, when we talk about submission, that is taslim. Chapter 2 verse 131, when God told Abraham, Aslim, he told God, Aslamtu li Rabbil Alameen, I submit to the Lord of the worlds. Now this submission is different from the sujood, submission of sujood. Do you get my point? The Aslim, not everyone will be a Muslim. That's why God is telling us, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu, ittaqullaha haqqa tuqati wa la tamutunna illa wa antum muslimun. Chapter 3 verse 102. He says, O you who believe, be pious to God and do not die except while you are submitters, Muslim. So only believers can become Muslims. So only believers are Muslims. So when you are a Muslim, that is when you submit to God. That submission is different from the way God has designed your life to go. You understand? So when the sun and the moon are doing sujood to God, it doesn't mean they are putting their head down. It is the way God designed them. They have to act in accordance to that. That is the sujood they are doing. Do you get my point? Now, in physically as a human being, you going down, falling down like this in front of somebody is to show them that you surrender. You do what they say. That is the act of submission for a human being. So the way you, the human being, do your submission is different from the way somebody else will do his submission. Do you understand my point? Good. Now, when you say submission to God, the real submission in the Quran is taslim. When God says aslim to Abraham, he said aslam to the Rabbil Alameen. Then again, chapter 5 verse 44, God says the prophets, they submitted to God. Yeah, Menaz Khan, the act of the sujood, the submission, showing submission is different from the taslim of worshipping God. That taslim, that submission, the sujood, they are doing the heavens and the earth and everything. It is the way God has designed them to be. They have to act according to the will of God. That is the sujood there. Do you understand? So when God instructed the angels to do the sujood, they had no choice. They have to go down and fall down and do the prostration. So to them, they can do prostration. To us, we can do prostration. But to other creatures, there is the different way of they are showing their sujood. So chapter 22 verse 18 of the Quran, God is saying, do you not see? He says, do you not see? Now when you are seeing the sun and the moon and the things doing their submission, it is the way they are designed to submit to God, to show their submission to God. Which means God says the sun must shine, the sun has to appear and shine. God says the moon must go like a manazila till it becomes full, it has to go like that. God says it has to rain, it has to submit to God and rain. You see the different forms of submission in that context. But when we say the taslim, Chapter 3 verse 20 talks about submission, aslim. You tell the ignorant, the unlearned ones, have you submitted? You understand? Prophet Muhammad himself said he submits to God. Chapter 39 verse 54. God says we should repent to him and then submit to him. Only believers will do that. Chapter 6 verse 71. What did God command the believers to do? He says, Kul inna huda Allahi huwal huda wa umirna linuslima li rabbil alamin. Now believers have been commanded to submit to the Lord of the worlds. So this submission is different from the submission of what? Sujood, the way the heavens and the earth and the moon and everything does. There's a different connotation to that. Now, so that is the form of taslim. That is the condition of having submitted yourself, surrendering power to another. That is why, as a Muslim, you say, La quwwata illa billah. Chapter 18, verse 39. La quwwata illa billah means there is no power except by God. So that is the taslim. Yes, taslim, yes. You submit yourself, you surrender yourself to God. Whatever He says, you are willing to do that. Right? So now, when we say literal type of sujood, when we talk about the people, the way we do our sujood is different from the way the heavens and the earth, the moon, the sun, everything do their sujood. We are not the same, remember. I gave you the example. The way Joseph saw the dream, chapter 12, verse 4, he said he saw the sun and the moon, and then the planets doing sujood to him. But when it was translated in the physical life, when human beings were the ones to do to him, they have to actually fall down, chapter 12, verse 100. They fell down to translate the dream he saw. But in that dream, he didn't say he saw the sun and the moon falling down to prostrate him. That is the point I'm making. But when it comes to the people, it is a physical act we do. That's why chapter 48 verse 29, God says, you will see the people falling down in rukui, in sujud, sujada, rukka and sujada. For people, we do it physically. But any other thing, they have their own way of showing the submission. Do you get my point? So when we say the people do the literal sujood, that is chapter 84 verse 21. God says, and when the Quran is being read to them, they do not do sujood. Do you know why in that context they do not do sujood? It's talking about prostration. Because chapter 17 verse 107, God is telling you that for those who were given the knowledge, whenever it is recited to them, they fall down to their chins in sujood, in sujada. Chapter 19 verse 58, the prophets of God, whenever the book is recited to them, they fall down in sujadan to God. Chapter 32 verse 15, whenever they are reminded by the verses of God, they fall down sujadan to God. So 84 verse 21 is actually telling you that whenever the Quran is being read to them, they do not prostrate. So we have people who do not prostrate when they do their salat, because the act is in the salat. It is the salat you do the reading of the Quran, then you prostrate. Some people will tell you, no, there's no physical act of prostration in the Quran. I do not need to prostrate to God. So even if you recite the verses to them in the salat, they will not go down to show the submission. So as a human being, yours is to show submission by going down. That is how God designed you. So don't compare yourself with the sun and say, oh, the sun and the moon, I can see them doing sujood, but how come they are not doing like me? Oh my God. Do you see my point? So chapter 17 verse 44, the glorification we all do to God. But God says you do not comprehend how the heavens and the earth do their own glorification. You don't comprehend. So even if you see the sun and the moon doing their sujood to God, how can you comprehend how they do it? You can only see, but it doesn't mean you comprehend. If I ask you, can you see my son? And then you are watching and you say, I can see him. But does that mean you comprehend who he is? Like you really know him? No. Do you see the point? You can only see him, but you don't actually know him. Like know what he is capable of what is entailed. You get my point? So now when we say physical act of prostration, that is meant for the human beings and the angels we can see in the Quran. They do it physically. Yes. But when it comes to sujood for other creatures, they don't do it physically for you to see. They show by submission, right? By submission. So the way we see the moon working, the way we see the sun moving, that is the act of submitting to God. They have submitted in their own form. It is the human being God used the word taslim. We have to do salim to him, to submit to him before we enter the garden of God, right? So now, to bring this topic to an end, I take you to chapter 25, verse 60. There are some people, when you tell them as a human being, you have to do a physical prostration to God. God says, وَإِذَا كِيلَ لَهُمْ أَسْجُدُوا لِلرَّحْمَنِ قَالُوا وَمَا الرَّحْمَنُ أَنَسْجُدُ لِمَا تَأْمُرُونَ وَزَادَهُمْ نُفُورًا. God says, and when they are told, sujud, prostrate to God, that is the gracious, they say, what is the gracious? What is Rahman? Should we prostrate to what you command us? And it augments them in aversion. So we have people who just go angry because you say they have to do prostration to God, forgetting that they are human beings. A human being, an angel, God shows us from the evidence of the Quran, they can do physical prostration. They can do it literally. Go down and show their submission to God. Right? So now, for those who don't believe in the act of prostration, actually going down, the question is, chapter 2, verse 85. God says, أَفَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْضِ الْكِتَابِ وَتَكْفُرُونَ بِبَعْضٍ? Do you believe in part of the book and disbelieve in part? Why will you do that? Because if you believe the entire book, then you should believe there is the physical act of prostration also in the Quran. I'm not saying always sujud means physical act. Sometimes it's literal, sometimes it's non-literal. Just check the context. Chapter 10, verse 39, God says, بَلْ كَذَّبُوا بِمَا لَمْ يُحِيطُوا بِعِلْمِهِ وَلَمَّا يَأْتِهِمْ تَأْوِيلُهُ كَذَلِكَ كَذَّبَ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ فَانْظُرْ كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةُ الظَّالِمِينَ. Right? So God says they have denied that which they have not encompassed its knowledge. And its interpretation has not yet come to them. Likewise did those before them do. Now observe how was the end of the transgressors. Right? So for people who are telling you there is no act of physical sujood in the Quran, I'm telling you they have not actually finished studying the Quran. They need a great deal of Arabic to study and then context to study. Right? So ladies and gentlemen, this is where I drop the topic for sujood. Somebody is asking a question. Jasim says, I have a question, brother. What do you say during prostration? And do you say it loudly or audibly? Well, I'm going to talk about salat in my next topic, right? But as for when you go down in prostration, chapter 32 verse 15 shows you, فَسَبِّي بِحَمْدِ رَبِّكَ, you do glorification of God when you do sujood. Apart from that, chapter 17 verse 108, it says, Subhana Rabbina in kana wa'du Rabbina la maf'ula. You can do a lot of glorification when you go in prostration. You can do your dua, you can do a lot of glorification there, or your dua and supplication and worship God, right? So when you are down there, you can actually study. Then apart from that, you can, how do you call it? When you are doing your salat, you don't need to be loud, you don't need to be silent. It has to be in between. Chapter 17 verse 110. It says, وَابْتَغِي بَيْنَ ذَلِكَ سَبِيلًا. So you need to seek a way in between. When you're doing your salat, you don't need to shout, you don't need to do silently, right? No problem. Amar Singh, no problem. My Arabic is weak. I'm not an Arabian, so I don't expect myself to be perfect in Arabic. You that know Arabic, where are you? I think you ended up being a mushrik, unfortunately. So I'm not here to show people that I'm best in Arabic. I have Arabians even watching me. So what are you to show? Amar Singh doesn't even show that you are an Arabian. So that is how brainwashed people can be. Thank you very much, Jasim Al-Katan. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and patience. This is where I dropped the topic concerning the sujood. For anybody who is telling you there is no physical act of sujood in the Quran, that is wrong. There, in some context, there is a physical act for human beings. Actually, showing your sujood, you need to show it physically, right? You don't show sujood by in your head and say, "Oh, I've sujood." No, you do it physically, right? James Ada says, Salat, yes, of course. You have to use the Quran for your Salat. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and patience. You can see the last minute I'm getting exhausted, so I started going slow because I've not eaten. So now I need to go and get something to eat. So ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much for your time and patience. I appreciate your patience, and hopefully, God willing, I'll be talking about the concept of Salat. I'll give you every evidence to show you why Salat is a ritual and why you need to stand your Salat according to the way God showed you. Like I told you, to remove the benefit of the doubt, I will not give you the single need for you to doubt God. Right? He says, Al-haqqu min rabbika fala takunanna min al-mumtarin. The truth is from your Lord, so do not doubt at all. Do not be among the doubters. Right? And I tell you, any scholar out there who claims I'm just deviating people or lying, ask for one thing, a live dialogue. And then you see how I set them up as scapegoats, inshallah. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Subhana rabbi izzati amma yasifun, wassalamu ala al-mursalin, walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Yes, indeed, Mufassir, Brother Mufassir. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you.